It's all in your head. You don't look sick. Your tests are normal. It's probably anxiety. There's nothing wrong with you. Have you heard these words from physicians, family, and friends? If you're someone who has been struggling and swirling through the revolving door of healthcare to find answers about your health, or if you know someone who is going through this experience, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to the Desperate for a Diagnosis podcast with Laura Nozicka, a show dedicated to exploring the challenges of living with undiagnosed or rare medical conditions. This podcast explores both sides of the bedside. We will be speaking with patients who have had challenges with finding a diagnosis, along with experts in the field. I'm your host, Laura Nozicka. Please note, I am not a medical professional, nor am I affiliated with any healthcare, pharmaceutical, or device company. I am an entrepreneur, and I am an independent market researcher focused on helping healthcare organizations better understand the patient perspective. The podcast is not meant to offer medical advice, but to merely share the stories and perspectives of podcast guests. Hello, and welcome to the Desperate for a Diagnosis podcast. I am your host, Laura Nozicka, and I am really jazzed to be here today with you with my guest, Emma Smith. She is this dynamic young lady who just has so much to say, and I can't wait for you to hear her out. And she's going to talk with us today about her journey with long COVID. But what makes it even more interesting is we know lots of people are going through issues with long COVID, but she is only 25. And her perspective is interesting from the standpoint of a young person having to deal with a chronic disease and her experience with the health system. So let me introduce you to Emma. I'll tell you a little bit about her, and then we'll just let her take it away and tell her story. Emma Smith is a freelance journalist, music connoisseur, and adventurer enthusiast. She currently writes about the ramifications of the COVID-19 pandemic, including post-viral condition, long COVID. Her piece, Doctors, Two States, One Invisible Illness, went viral on Medium. And if all of you don't know about Medium, how would you describe it, Emma? Kind of self-publishing platform?
It's a self-publishing platform, I would say, and people can freelance, and there's different publications within it, but people that just want to write, but they're not freelancing, it's that kind of platform.
Great. Awesome. Yeah, not everyone knows about Medium, but I do because I actually have a few articles on Medium as well. Anyway, Emma graduated from the University of Montana School of Journalism in 2021. And throughout college, she was a reporter and photographer for the Montana Cayman while balancing climbing, skiing, and road trips to the desert Southwest. Wow. When you said that you were a adventurer enthusiast, you were not lying. That's for sure. She had work published in the Oregonian, the Washington Post, the Bozeman Daily Chronicle, and long COVID connections on Medium. So this girl, for all she's been through, as Alicia Keys says, she's on fire for sure. So Emma Smith, it's so nice to meet you. And I do have to talk about first how we met. And it's all because of a guest that I've had on my podcast twice, Dr. Gary Simmons. He is a neurosurgeon. And Gary is super in tune with the whole premise for the podcast. And he sent me your article from Medium. I read it and had to talk to you. And you responded so quickly about being on the podcast. So welcome, Emma.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here today and to talk to you. It's going to be really fun.
Well, our pre-chat was fantastic. I'd love to take some of that and mash it into this podcast, but we're going to get even more in the weeds about your journey with long COVID and where that all started. And again, the name of your article could not encapsulate the premise of this podcast better. 10 doctors, 2 states, 1 invisible illness. And I read your article right away when Dr. Gary sent it to me. And I just could not believe that, again, totally encapsulated what the podcast is about, but also not surprising, but surprising from the standpoint of, again, you being so young, you're 25, and yet your journey started a few years ago. And so, Emma, why don't you tell us a little bit about where your journey started with not long COVID, of course, but at what point in time you contracted COVID, what you were doing at the time, and where it all went from there. And we'll just have a conversation about all things in between.
Yes. So it's actually hilarious because I remember this day so vividly, and it feels, I'm sure for most people, it feels like a decade ago, but for me, it's like I think about it a lot. I tested positive for COVID on November 3rd in 2020, which was election day in Montana. And I woke up that morning feeling just pretty weird. And as you all heard from my intro, like I'm an adventure enthusiast. So I was constantly just very go, go, go. Most people that know me call me like the no sleep queen in college. Like I was constantly going and climbing and being a journalist. And so I woke up this day feeling like kind of chilly and congested. And because I was living in Montana, I was like, I'm probably okay. And myself and my reporting partner, we had been prepping like all semester for our makeshift final exam for our capstone class called Covering Elections at the journalism school. And so we had a project to do. And so when I woke up, I just thought, this is work. I have to go do this. And so we drove down to Hamilton, Montana, which is in the Bitterroot Valley. And we spoke to voters who chose to vote in person at the polls at the elections office in Hamilton. And I photographed voters. He spoke to them, and then we got lunch, and we got back around like 2 p.m. And around that time, I just noticed that I felt way worse than I had that morning. I just felt super run down and fatigued, and I was laying in bed, and it was like 2 p.m. I thought, this isn't normal for me. I don't lay in bed at 2 p.m. And it was my reporting partner and dear friend's birthday that evening, and we had all made plans to go to dinner at Sakatumi Sushi in downtown Missoula, which is a really high-end like sushi joint. And I kind of thought to myself, COVID was around at that point, and we were in a surge, and I thought, okay, I don't think I have it, but in the off chance that I do, if I go to dinner with like 4 or 5 of my close friends and give it to all of them, like I will never forgive myself. And so I was 22. I called the Curry Health Center at the University of Montana and asked for a COVID test. I was like, there's no way I have it, but what if I do? And they told me that at 5 p.m., if I tested positive, they would call me. And if I was negative, they wouldn't call me, which was like not an all anxiety inducing.
No, not at all.
Not at all.
Because results come so quickly. Why would you think you'd have to wait, right?
Yeah. And so I was like pacing back and forth in my like 1-bedroom basement apartment, which I nicknamed the Hobbit hole because the shower head was like 5'8" and I'm 5'10". So I had to like, it was interesting. So like pacing back and forth, I was like, I'm probably fine, probably just have a cold, it's probably okay. And then at like 4:59, my phone started buzzing. It said Curry Health Center. And I was like, oh, shoot. And of course I answered. The lady's like, yeah. The nurse said, yeah, you have COVID. You tested positive. That's why you're feeling this way, but you're young. You'll be fine. And I'll never forget her saying that because she was very, very incorrect with that statement. So, yes.
Yeah. Little did she know, and little did you.
Little did I know. Yeah.
At that point. Yeah. So COVID recovery is different for everyone. Some people were laying in bed for a week. For some people, it was worse. And outside of just kind of the usual and customary treatment, at what point, Emma, did you feel like this doesn't seem to be going away.
Yeah. So, I was really, really sick with COVID. I was sick for probably 10 days. Couldn't really get out of bed. I couldn't read because I had such terrible brain fog. Couldn't smell, couldn't taste. I mean, it was the sickest I'd ever felt in my life. And I was 22, so it kind of freaked me out. And then I eventually started to get my sense of smell back. And that's how I kind of knew that I was getting better. The first day of quarantine, this was not the best decision, but I went skiing because I'd been so cooped up. I was like, I need to go do something, which is not what you're supposed to do. So don't do that if you have COVID. And then I flew home for Thanksgiving. And I remember working on a written final exam for I think it was my Irish studies class. I had some class where I had to write an exam. I had to write an essay. And I remember just sitting on the couch in my parents' living room and thinking, I feel really, really run down. And it's been a while since I've had COVID. Maybe I'm still recovering. And then it wasn't until I would say January or February, I was training for the spring season for climbing because my friends and I would go down to Moab, Utah every spring for for spring break. And so we were training. So I was waking up around 6 a.m. to go to the gym and lift weights and then climb and work on endurance climbing. And I did that. And then I remember vividly, I did it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then Friday, I just woke up that day feeling really tingly in my legs. And my body felt like it was made of cement. And I was a sub 6 mile runner in high school. I went to Steens Mountain Running Camp 2 years in a row, which is a really high intensity, kind of aggressive running camp. I know what it's like to feel sore and to feel run down. This was very, very different. Mm-hmm. And so I laid in bed. I didn't end up finishing my climbing routine for that week. And I was also working at Freestone Climbing Gym in Missoula. And I remember I started calling in sick then. And this was in 2021. So that's when my crashes, post-exertional malaise crashes really started. And I had no idea what they were. And it was not fun.
What kind of crashes?
So they're called, for people that don't know what long COVID and chronic fatigue syndrome is, the crashes, they're called post-exertional malaise crashes.
Oh.
Stands for PEM. And basically you wake up and you feel like you have the worst possible flu. So you feel like your entire body is made of cement, you're made of battery acid. It's awful. You can have headaches, light sensitivity, numbness, tingling, muscle weakness. And that's when all of that started for me, was in 2021, after that week where I tried to wake up every day at 6 a.m., which probably wasn't the greatest idea, but I was a doer. That's how I've always been. So
yeah. I have to ask you, what is the attraction to climbing? What makes that a passion for you?
I tried to figure out how to answer that for so many years. I think for me, I have a very overactive brain. I'm constantly overthinking everything, and I'm a very socially anxious, chronic worrier and overthinker. And for me, it's the same with running, just these highly intense, I don't want to say adrenaline seeking sports, because to me, it's not about the adrenaline. I'm actually very terrified of doing, really crazy stuff like that. Like I said, I'm an overthinker, but for me, sports where you have to only focus on what you're doing, because if you don't, you immediately feel kind of the ramifications of what you're doing, like running and climbing. It's always attracted me to that. And with climbing, when you're climbing, the only thing you're thinking about is what you're doing, is the individual movement. And it takes every part of your brain up. It's consuming your thinking.
Oh, you're very very focused.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also kind of meditative, because you're having to breathe as you move your body up the wall. It's forced meditation. And everyone that I know that is obsessed with climbing struggles very deeply and personally with anxiety, and it just silences their brain when they do it. And it's also just a very positive atmosphere for the most part. So yeah. And plus, it's just taken me to really beautiful places. I mean, I've climbed in over 5 states, and it's always just, I don't know, I always leave feeling really good. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah. When I was your age, definitely I was not climbing. I think I was just getting out of the roller skate phase or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's so cool that that you do that. And so you have all these passions and yet and all this energy. Oh my God, all this energy that you have between your passions, physical passions, and then your writing and all of that. And you're just in this slumpy funk of not being able to get out of bed. And now it's several months since you were diagnosed, because you said you were diagnosed in November of 20, correct?
Well, I was officially diagnosed in February of 2023, which was last year.
Okay. Okay.
I lived with this for 3 years and didn't know what was going on with me,
But
which
COVID,
was,
you were diagnosed
well,
with
yeah, COVID was in
November.
2020. Sorry.
Yeah. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. So you're going through this funk and slump and what's happening at that point? What kind of reaction are you getting from family, from friends?
Yeah. So, I didn't tell any of my friends about this for a long time. And I don't really know why I did that. I think part of it, I just tend to kind of hold things in, which I'm trying to work on. And I think a lot of my friends we were in our 20s and graduation was approaching. We were kind of in this weird pandemic time, still trying to figure out, what we were going to do, internships, jobs, stressing about that. And I think that I felt like I could handle it on my own. And I also didn't think a lot of them would understand what I was going through. And when I would try to tell people like, hey, I feel weird, it was kind of dismissed or ignored, and not like with malintent or anything. Like people weren't dismissing it because they didn't care. They were dismissing because they didn't know how to handle it. So I just didn't tell people. And I personally, I think because I could still work, I thought, oh, I'm fine. This isn't that big of a deal.
Mhm.
I told my mother because I told my mother everything. And my mother has she has a background in nursing. And so I told her in 2021, I'm really tired all the time. And because my mom is very smart, she sent me an article on long COVID and said, maybe you have this. It's starting to come out in the news. And I read about it and I was like, oh, maybe I do. Okay. And then I kind of ignored it because, like I said, I could work and I could climb still. So I thought, oh, I'm fine. This isn't really, really affecting me. I mean, I'm having to take a week off of work, once a month to rest, but this isn't that bad yet. So, 22-year-old brain, I wasn't really, not a lot of forward thinking. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, and certainly not wanting to be held down, held back, very resilient. I got stuff to
Yes.
do.
I got stuff to do.
Ain't nobody got time for that. And so
Yeah.
you were kind of going along there. But when was the kind of the real crash for you that got you starting on this journey of seeing doctors?
Yes. So the crash that I remember that really started to kind of set like the alarm bells off in my brain was in October of 2021. So I had graduated, I was living in Missoula, I was working almost full time at the climbing gym, and I had just finished an internship in Bozeman working as a photojournalist. And I had something really terrible happen in my family with my younger brother. And my family has a history of we lost my older brother when I was really little. He passed away from leukemia when I was 4.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And it's okay. Thank you. And my little brother had this really rare thing happen. He had a sinus infection that traveled into his brain, and it's like 1 in a million chance of it happening, but it happened to him. And so I basically got a call that he was really sick. And then 3 days later, I got another call that he had had emergency brain surgery. And if he hadn't have had that, he could have had a stroke and or died. And he was like, I think he was 17 at the time when this happened. So it was just like a little bit too close to what my family had already gone through.
Sure.
And I mean, basically, they almost didn't catch it because the doctor basically accused my mom of being overly dramatic. It was terrible.
Wow. Wow. So even your father has a story of his own interaction in the healthcare system. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just awful. And so I got that call and it just set something off, and I was climbing a lot. And I remember waking up and just having this feeling terrible physically again. And I was invited to go on this multi-pitch climb 3 hours from Missoula for Halloween. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this because I don't want to think about what's going on. I need to distract myself. And so I woke up at like 4 a.m. I felt really, really terrible, but I was like, it's fine. I'll push through it. The approach, which is the hike into the actual climb, was 3 miles. And as we're hiking out there, I was with my roommate and his girlfriend. I remember just feeling like out of body, so crappy. My entire body was stiff and achy. And I paused just to like breathe, try to catch my breath. And all the trees around me blurred together. And I was like, okay, that's not normal. We're just starting the day. This is like a 5+ pitch climb. This is going to be a lot of physical exertion. Can I even do this? And we kept hiking. And then I said, hey guys, I need to stop. And they both looked at me and they were like, Emma, you look really pale. Like, let's sit down. Have you eaten? Because I have a tendency of forgetting to eat. And I was like, I've eaten. I swear. Like, I've had water. I've had food. Like, I don't know what's going on. And we ended up not doing the climb. My roommate drove myself and his girlfriend back to Missoula, and I slept for probably 4 hours when I got home. I went to the doctor the next day, told them all my symptoms, and the doctor said, I have no idea what's going on with you. This sounds really bizarre. But that was the crash where I was like, this is not going away. It's not getting better. What the heck is going on with my body?
Yeah. 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 And so, so now your friends are experiencing, kind of what you're going through at that point. And now you're at the point where you're starting this journey with physicians. So your article had mentioned 10 doctors. What kind of doctors did you see? What were their specialties?
Yeah. So I saw a few urgent care doctors. I saw a PCP, so primary care provider in Missoula. I saw that doctor 3 times over the course of the late winter to early spring in Missoula. When I went to the emergency room in spring of 2022, I saw 4 ER doctors.
Oh, wow.
And then when I got home to Oregon, I saw my mom's PCP, and she found the low B12. And then I saw a naturopath, 2 neurologists, and yeah. Yes, that's everyone I saw.
And what was the reason for having to continue to see all these physicians?
Because, in Missoula, I felt terrible, and no one was actually testing me for anything. They were just all writing off my symptoms and my fatigue as depression. And so when my B12 dropped in the spring of 2022, I suddenly couldn't work or climb, and I was bedbound all the time. And I kept going to different doctors, and I got my PCP, and she just kept diagnosing me with depression and tried to put me on a psychiatric drug.
Oh,
She tried to put me on Lexapro, and I was like, I don't want to take that. There's something wrong with me physically. Like, this isn't going to help me feel better.
Yeah. Did you go on any of those psych meds? Did you try any of them?
I did. I tried Lexapro. Did not help because, again, my B12 was low. And then all of last year, I took 3 to 4 different SSRIs, none of which helped me. So it was just, my brain was just in this up and down roller coaster for 6 months, trying all these different antidepressants, and none of them made me feel better.
Yeah. What for you indicated that, okay, no, I'm not having some kind of, let's just call it some kind of psychological break or mental health issue? You said this, you knew it, that wasn't it. How do you innately know that this is just not what's going on with me? You felt like you really knew what was going on or not going on with your body. How do you know?
Because I know my body, and I've been through trauma. I live with grief. I know what depression is for me, and I knew that it wasn't that. And I knew it when I couldn't, go through with my coping mechanisms of movement for my body. When I couldn't do that anymore, I thought, okay, there's something physically wrong with me. And, like I said, I was an athlete. I've been an athlete my entire life. And when I suddenly couldn't go on a walk for more than 10 minutes without, feeling like my body was shutting down, I thought, this is not a mental health thing. This is a physical ailment. And the medical system isn't listening to me. It's a very scary feeling when you're in your 20s, have to live with that.
Yeah. And so these physicians that you're seeing who are kind of putting you on the track of something mental health related, what kind of communication are you having with the physicians in terms of trying to get them to understand that this is not my issue? What else could we be looking at? How did you start to advocate for yourself at that point?
Yeah. So, originally I didn't, because again, I was 22, 23, and I didn't know I was allowed to really demand testing and to really say, hey, you're not listening to me. I didn't feel comfortable doing that. And so, in Montana, right before I left Missoula, my mom actually kind of constructively yelled at my doctor and said, basically, like, you're not listening to her. This is not her normal, and you need to test her for everything. And then the doctor, after my mom did that, then the doctor was like, I guess, yeah, we can do that, which is ridiculous because I asked for that and she was like, you don't need any of that, basically.
So
Or
your
just,
mom asked for the same thing, same testing that you asked for. Your mom's case for getting the testing got you the testing, but when you asked, you couldn't get it. What did that say to you about physicians and the healthcare system?
I think that, this is a very, this is a very grand statement, but from everyone I've met with long COVID and every person I've met that has gone through chronic health issues, the healthcare system does not listen or believe young women. And that's not okay.
Mm.
It's unacceptable. We have a tendency to not believe just women in general, I think. It's really disturbing. But to answer your question, I started to advocate for myself when I moved back to Oregon, because after they found my low B12, the first PCP I saw back in Oregon, she listened to me and she tested me for B12, and my B12 is in the hundreds, which is very, very deficient. And she was like, I'm so sorry you went through this. The healthcare system is, she was admitting that the healthcare system was messed up.
Mhm.
And, when I had to get a referral to a neurologist because I got COVID again in June of 2022 and I didn't take Paxlovid, so I had a whole new range of symptoms start. And that's when my fatigue got worse. She was like, let's get you a neurologist. And the first neurologist I saw was terrible. He gaslit, dismissed, ignored me, made me feel horrible.
In what way, Emma? What kind of words was that doctor or doctors using, that, or what were they saying or body language, whatever. What did you observe that made you feel that way?
Yeah. So the first time I saw him, I was with my mom, and he was warm and kind, and basically was like, you don't need to worry about her. Like, she's going to recover. She's going to be okay. And then I saw him again because I started having heart palpitations and racing heartbeat and muscle weakness, tingling, numbness, all of this stuff. And I couldn't work. I was like, this is not my normal. I can't climb. I can't work. I can't run. Everything is wearing me out. And I saw him alone, and I told him that. He just sat there, no emotion, very robotic, and said to me, Emma, all of this is stemming from your anxiety and your depression.
Mhm. And this was
And I remember
PCP?
this was my neurologist that I saw, the first
Neurologist?
neurologist
Oh,
neurologist. Yes.
Okay.
The first neurologist I was referred to. And I was like, I don't understand how muscle weakness is tied to depression. That doesn't make any sense to me. But he just kind of looked at me like, you're being dramatic, you're being crazy. You just need to try harder and then you'll get better, And I asked him for, an MRI of my spine because I was having muscle weakness and fatigue. And those were, and I was also having muscle twitching, which is a symptom of MS.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, you don't need that. That's not necessary. And then when he diagnosed me with POTS and dysautonomia, he said, I want you to stop drinking coffee and caffeine and stop eating like sugar. I said, I've been drinking coffee since I was 12. Like, do I have to stop drinking coffee? And he goes, yes. I said, are you sure I have this? Because he did like a very just like standard, but like not official test. And he said, I'm pretty sure you have this. Like, you're just within the range. And I said, well, what's the official test? And he said, oh, it's a tilt table test. And can I have that? He goes, no, you don't need that.
Oh.
And then he tied everything else back, all of my symptoms. He said, this is all linked. Your fatigue is linked to your migraines, which is linked to your depression and your anxiety. And I was like, what? That doesn't that's a really weird spider web that you're connecting together. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, and the thing about fatigue and headaches and whatnot, I mean, those are symptoms that could be tied to a lot of different things.
Yes.
And to not get testing to rule things out is kind of just throwing the dart at the dartboard, and wherever it goes, it goes. But it sounds so he was thinking more depression, anxiety, etc. But what got him thinking it could have been POTS, and what other testing did he give you, if any?
Yeah, so he did a standard. There's a test that you do where you have your patient lay down, you take their heart rate and their blood pressure, you have them sit up, do that again, and then stand up. Because with POTS, what it is your heart rate doesn't really regulate, and so it can go up 30 beats per second. And that's what was happening with my heart. And my heart, extra beats, palpitations, or my heart skips a beat. That's very common with long COVID. And so he did that. But, the good diagnostic test is to do a tilt table test because there's other things that can catch. And eventually I did get that. I got into the long COVID clinic at OHSU, and the first thing they asked me is, why did you not have this test done sooner? And I said, because I was told I didn't need it. And they go, well, that's not true. You do need it.
Oh, wow.
And that was a lot of just anger and frustration. But, I've been thinking about this. I think the thing that has stuck with me that has caused the most anger, because I know that long COVID is really hard to diagnose. And the medical system, it's so new. They still are figuring it out. And I get that. The thing that makes me really angry is that I was telling all these doctors, I was saying what my normal was, that I climbed 6 days a week. I was a journalist. I was a skier, a runner, an athlete. I am a doer. This is who I am. And then I was telling them, I can barely get out of bed. I can barely leave the house more than once a week. I feel like I'm dying. My body is shutting down all the time. What is going on with me? And they would look at me like they didn't believe me, like I was crazy. They would go, that was your normal? What? Like, are you sure? And it's like, yes, I'm sure. And then there was just no sense of like, are you okay? Are you feeling grief? How are you feeling emotionally? They would just say, we don't know how to help you, or this is depression. See you in 6 months. Good luck.
Mm-hmm. What did they do to rule things out, or what was ruled out for you?
My original PCP in Oregon, she ran all the tests that she had the authority to run as a PCP. So she tested, my C-reactive protein. She tested, there's specific tests that can detect muscle wasting in case I had, ALS or MS. I didn't show any sign of that. Then my first neurologist I saw refused to do any testing that I asked him to do. So I got a new neurologist, and he was going to help me do it's like a nerve conduction study test, which is really painful. And my childhood best friend had that done when she had her own health issue. And she basically told me, you don't want to have this done. It's really painful, which I think perhaps is why the first neurologist didn't want me to do it, because he didn't want to put me through that, which I understand. But there's other things he could have done to show me that this is what I had. But he just withheld all the information, which made me feel even worse because this was causing me so much anxiety. What is wrong with my body? But I didn't get any other testing done until I got into the long COVID clinic. And that's when they gave all that testing to me. So I had to wait.
You had the tilt table test. What else? What other kind of testing or services did you get through the long COVID clinic?
Yeah, so I had a tilt table test. I had my first PCP did an MRI of my brain. And then I was in a clinical trial at OHSU, and, they tested, my microclotting, because with long COVID patients, we have microclotting, and a whole bunch of other stuff as well, C-reactive protein, checking for inflammation, that kind of stuff. And I haven't had any other testing done just because I know what I have now. And I am like, okay, there's nothing else that they can really do. And perhaps I'm just tired of explaining my situation to doctors. It's exhausting.
Yeah. Well, when you have to tell 10 people over and over what you're experiencing and not getting any answers, I could see where you just get exhausted. You just get tired of making your case every single time, which having to advocate for yourself can be really, really tiring and frustrating.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a long journey, and honestly, I'm very tired. I'm very burnt out from it. And
you said when we had our pre-chat, you had said that you lost a lot of friends because of what you've been through. Why do you think, and how are they reacting to you? And again, I'm really interested from a standpoint of being an active young person with all these things going for you, and to have been exposed to the healthcare system early on and learning what that means for you. But your friends, you said you lost so many. What was happening there?
yes, so when things got really bad in like September of 2022, so that was all of last year. Or that it was 2023. It was all of last year. A lot of my friends checked in, and then when I moved home to Oregon and started to really get into this really dark headspace dealing with the medical gaslighting and just not being able to work, I would text people and they just wouldn't respond, or I'd call people and they wouldn't call me back, and it got really dark and really painful. And a lot of them, I think, just were busy. They have jobs. They're dating people. I get it. They're living their life. They're in their 20s. And I had to kind of realize that if they want to leave my life, I just have to let them, because you can't control people. And the amount of energy I was putting into it was hurting me. And I didn't have that energy anymore because it was going into trying to like stay alive and regulate what I was dealing with. What helped me, I have two friends, one, my childhood best friend, and the other person is my college best friend, who have both been through their own health issues and crises where they've had to, leave college or wherever they were, live with their parents and confront the healthcare system and get better on their own. And they both told me people that you love who have loved you for a long time are going to leave you because they cannot handle it or they don't know how to handle it. They don't have the emotional maturity. They don't have the capacity because they're thinking about one person themselves. And it sounds really evil and negative, but it just is how it is. That's how people are in their 20s, I think. And I've made peace with it. And those two women showed up for me.
Oh.
And that's what matters to me because they understand what it's like to have the foundation of your life ripped out from under you and have to rebuild it on your own without any help because people don't know how to help you.
Yeah. And thinking about mortality so early.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yes. It's, well, and I think, seeing my older brother die and experiencing his death when I was so little, I was 4, it showed me that nothing is permanent and how fragile life is and how everything can be ripped away from you. Stuff happens. And in those moments, like it really puts life into perspective of like, okay, this is what matters. We have to just forget everything else because, and then the people that show up for you during those times without any excuses, they just show up for you. They answer your calls, they text you back, they check in. It's like, okay, that's who has my back. And I have a buddy who has long COVID. Her name is Mia. And she and I chatted recently and she said, yeah, this whole experience really shows you who your fair weather friends are, which is actually a Queens of the Stone Age song, which is like one of my favorite bands. And it's the concept of people who only can be there for you when it's convenient for themselves.
Yeah.
And I have friends like that who I still love, but I'm like, yeah, you're a fair weather friend. And it's, you show up for me when it works best for you. And maybe one day you'll go through stuff and you'll grow out of that, or maybe you won't. And that I just have to accept that. But yeah, it's hard. And I had a lot of anger about it for a long time, but I've made peace with it because I know who I call them my guardian angels, but my friends who, have continued to show up for me during this time. And I'm so thankful for that.
Yeah. How are they showing up for you? Because if you had to give advice to young people who have friends that are going through something similar like you're going through or have a chronic condition, how would you suggest to them that they support that person who's going through a really rough time and something that may not resolve either over time? How would you suggest that they can support someone in your situation?
Yeah, just call them and say, how are you? And then and I don't mean this in a mean way, shut up and listen,
Mm-hmm.
just listen to them. And I know for me, I'm a huge nerd. So when people send me books, send me magazines, podcasts, send me writing, music, that's what makes me happy because that's what I'm able to participate in still. And I think friends that it takes 3 seconds, send them a text. Hey, how are you doing? Hey, I'm thinking about you. I have friends in Missoula who, are women and are climbers, and they send me an audio message when they're at the wall and they say, hey, I'm climbing and I wish you were here. I know that you will be here one day with me, but for right now, I want to let you know that I love you. It takes 10 seconds and it makes my day. Yeah, it's really not that hard to just show up for people. But that's what I appreciate. I don't know what other people appreciate, but from the people I've spoken to, just sending like a heart emoji. It's sweet. It's thoughtful. It takes 2 seconds. So things like that.
Yeah. Emma, you had mentioned you used the word gaslighting a couple of times. What does that mean for you, or how would you describe that? And what are a few examples of that?
Yes. So gaslighting for me, my experience with it has been with the healthcare system. And, it's telling someone how you're feeling and they deny it and then make you question your own reality. And in turn, it leads to someone not believing what they're feeling or what they're experiencing, thinking that it's wrong. And then it leads to increased depression, anxiety, and PTSD. So for me, it was going to these doctors saying, I have debilitating fatigue. I can't work. I can't move my body. How can you help me? And them saying, this is all in your head. There's nothing wrong with you. We can't do anything to help you, which was very, very not true.
Hmm.
They could help me. They could listen. They could run tests to rule things out or just say, hey, I don't know, but I'm willing to research things because that's my job as a provider and try to figure out what may be going on with your body. Or let's talk about it. Have you been infected with COVID in the past 2 years? What is your history, your family history? Is there a history of MS or other diseases that could be more genetic? Let's talk about what's going on. So I'm just saying, if it's all in your head, you're just overthinking it. You're a hypochondriac, you're crazy.
Yeah. Did these physicians not take a thorough history of you? These 10 doctors?
I know my PCP did, the first one that I saw. They must have, because you fill out forms before you go to the doctors that kind of explain. But, none of my family, we don't have a history of any of these things. There's history of cancer, but that's about it. But still, stuff happened. So,
Yeah. And again, early on, most young people in their 20s are certainly not thinking about a trip to the doctor other than maybe getting your school physical or you hurt yourself
back up.
climbing, you broke an arm, whatever, normal kid-ish kind of stuff, young person kind of stuff. So what's your impression of the healthcare system so early in life? What have you learned about how the healthcare system works?
Before I got sick, my two friends who've both been through health stuff kind of just said they hated the healthcare system. And I was like, oh, it's not that bad. I totally just dismissed them, which is so terrible of me. And then I went through this and I called them. I go, oh my God, this is really bad. I think our healthcare system right now focuses on profit. And not every single doctor is bad. Obviously, I've seen good doctors who have apologized to me for what I've gone through and said, this is terrible. I hope you never have to deal with this ever again. And I think what it is, doctors are humans. They're doing the best that they can. Some of them, are not great because they've gotten into the process of, robotic, 20 to 30 minute appointments where they have 20 minutes to hear you out and then throw you a diagnosis or prescribe you something. And I think the Western healthcare system is really focused on treating the symptoms with a Band-Aid instead of figuring out, what's going on inside. How do we systematically solve this? But again, we have insurance companies, we have companies that are producing medications, and that is how they get paid. It's really tied into that, I think, from the research that I've done. And I think that leads to really kind of questionable behavior sometimes. But I know that if you have a chronic condition, the healthcare system is absolutely exhausting to navigate. And, they have a tendency to ignore and dismiss people that are not men. And it leads to trauma. And that's not fun to deal with, speaking from personal experience.
Yeah. Why do you think, you mentioned earlier that you think that the healthcare system is not particularly friendly, let's say, to young women or women in general? What gives you that impression?
Because every single woman that I've met who's dealt with some kind of health problem or condition, it's taken them so much longer to get a diagnosis than my friends that are men who've gone to the doctor. And there's just this, when a woman goes to the doctor and says, I have this pain or I have this thing, a lot of doctors, not all of them, but some doctors find a way to link it back to something mental, and they don't offer testing. And then if a man goes to the doctor with the same symptom, oh yeah, we'll do an MRI. Oh yeah, we'll do this. Like, it's instant. A lot of people I know with long COVID that are men who have told me, they got diagnosed within 6 months. A lot of women I know with long COVID, it took them years. That's something to be said.
Were these younger people, these males?
Yes.
They were younger, like your
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Interesting.
So that's a very grand statement to say, but it is, it's from what I've seen and heard.
Yeah. So what makes a good doctor for you? If you had the opportunity to go back through your journey and have the ideal situation and interaction with physicians, what would that look like? You could wave that magic wand. What should it look like?
I think having empathy and being willing to listen, and, if you don't know what's going on with someone, with a patient, don't just immediately try to tie it back to mental health. Like, say, okay, I'm a doctor, I'm going to do my job and research what could possibly be going on with you. I'm a very empathetic person. And I think for me, when I'm greeted with, someone who's cold and detached and unempathetic, it really, really just turns me off as a person. I'm like, I don't like this. And, I have a new PCP in Portland, and I saw her this fall, and, I had my diagnosis. I told her I have long COVID, and I was explaining to her my symptoms, and she was typing on the computer, and she stopped, and she turned and looked at me and like had a visceral facial reaction and said, "Are you okay? This sounds terrible. Like, I cannot imagine the grief you must be feeling." And I was sitting there, and I was just so not used to that response that I like kind of got emotional, and I was like, I mean, it is what it is. Like, I'm doing what I can, but it's like, I left the appointment and I was like almost crying because I was like, oh my gosh, affirmation, so strange.
Yeah,
Never had that before.
Yeah, you were heard and seen.
Yeah, it was insane. And
wow,
that kind of gave me this, like, hearing that from her, it allowed me to start the healing process.
Yeah. Wow. And as far as support, how are you getting support through all of this? What's getting you through? Because you seem to be in a better place than what you described.
Yes.
And from laying in bed and all these things, but still not working necessarily and doing some of the things that you love, like climbing and whatnot. So what's gotten you to at least this somewhat better place?
Friends, family, music, and writing. That is why I am still here. And I do have a job in the horizon. So that is very exciting. It's very exciting.
Yes. I think you mentioned that during our pre-chat.
Yes. Yes.
So it came through for you.
It did come through for me, and I'm ecstatic. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And was that a writing job?
I can't share because I haven't officially. I just want to say that I have a job prospect, but it's within. I will say that it's within the media, so it's what I love to do.
Awesome.
Yes.
Cool. I'm so happy to hear that. That's a
thank you.
Always good when we can do what we love for work, right?
Yes. Yes.
So what would you say the health system could do better, and specifically for younger folks, in their teens or 20s, because you're certainly not a pediatric patient. And when we talk about pediatric patients, typically it's age 18 where patients age out, if you will, to adult medicine, but you're still in this kind of strange in between spot where most doctors maybe think, especially a primary care physician, is kind of just managing like normal childhood kind of stuff like asthma and some of those other things that kids have start in childhood and then of course follow you for your whole life, but nothing too crazy. But when it comes to a chronic illness like this that takes a lot more management, what can the healthcare system and clinicians do better for your age group?
Yes, I think when someone comes to you with symptoms that maybe don't make sense to you, don't immediately dismiss them and don't immediately write them off as the person, being in their head about it, or don't say like, are you sure? Yeah, they're at the doctor. They're sure. They came to you because they feel sick. Don't just immediately accuse them of overthinking it or being dramatic, So I would say that don't try to link it to mental health as well. And then just check in on them. If they're young and they're coming in repeatedly, they're probably not doing very well. There's a reason for that.
Mm-hmm.
So just because of their age or their gender, don't ignore them, because then it makes them feel worse. It lowers their self-esteem and then they question their intelligence. That's what happened to me. It took me a long time to build all that up. And then, offer them help, offer them referrals, the ones that you can do. If they ask for testing, consider it, because they're just trying to rule out what's wrong with them. And, with long COVID specifically, I think it's really tricky right now because we are, people are saying that the pandemic is over, and I don't see it as over. I see it as it's shifted. It's not this emergency situation, but there are still people that if they get COVID, they could die. That is still the case. And I think if we're going to allow COVID to continue to mutate and people want to live their lives, then the healthcare system needs to, doctors, providers go through education as to how long COVID appears in their faction of the body, the nervous system, the heart, I don't know all the facets of the body, but they need to be educated, because every person I know with long COVID has had to fight for their diagnosis and has been severely gaslit because doctors don't know how it appears. And it's like, this condition is horrible. It's suffering. And I'm so tired of hearing stories about people who, were sick for 4 years and then figured out that this is what they had. It's like, they shouldn't have to see over 100 doctors to just figure out something,
Right.
So
And
that's what I would say.
At what point, Emma, were you officially told that long COVID and that your symptoms together meant that you had long COVID, which seems to now be an official diagnosis, but it comes with a lot of symptoms, like you said, POTS. And what are some of the other symptoms that you're still dealing with?
Yeah, so chronic fatigue, dysautonomia or POTS. I have like muscle twitching and muscle weakness, migraines. So basically it's like post-concussion syndrome, which I did speech therapy or cognitive rehab, so it's gotten better. And yeah, but the thing that I'm on right now, the medication I'm on, is for my fatigue, which has actually helped a little bit so far. But everything else is just managing it. And, I wasn't diagnosed by a doctor with long COVID. I read a Washington Post article that explained it, and I showed it to my mom. She goes, yeah, this is what you have. And then we went to my neurologist, my second neurologist, and he was like, yeah, this sounds like what you have.
Okay.
I was like, okay. My mom said, what can we do for her? And he goes, she just has to pace. Like, they don't know what to tell you, because they don't know,
They're learning so much right now. I think I read somewhere, and, don't quote me as offering, medical information here, but I think
Yes.
it's something like there's 200 different symptoms that are
Yes.
associated with long COVID. And I know that there's some clinicians that poo-poo all of that. And it's just that they don't know. They don't know. Not everything's causal to a symptom. You just don't know. But to at least know what it isn't, to rule things out, can really quell some of that anxiety to begin with. So it's good if you can find a clinician that's willing to do that for you and go the extra mile to do all those tests. I think some of our listeners, Emma, might be curious as to whether or not you were vaccinated, if that's something you're willing to talk about.
Yeah. I am vaccinated, and I did have some weird complications from one of my boosters. And I'm like, I think everyone, it's their choice whether or not they want to be vaccinated. I personally have benefited from being vaccinated. It's protected me from COVID, but not everyone has had that same experience. The one time I had complications, I got my booster too soon after having COVID, and I had a racing heartbeat for a few months. And I think increased social anxiety, I'm pretty sure, because I just felt on edge all the time. And then it kind of went away. And I think it was from the booster. And for me, it has gone away, thank goodness. And my heart goes out to people who have had, reactions to the vaccine, because that surely is a thing. But yeah, I will continue to get boosters because it has protected me from COVID on several occasions. And in my experience, I would way rather get vaccinated and not get COVID than, get COVID again and deal with all of this. It's terrifying. And I'm trying to manage that anxiety till this day about how do I live my life, but, and live in a world where COVID is present. So, yes.
How did doctors respond to you when you've said, well, I think these complications might be a result of the booster or the vaccine? What kind of reactions did you get from the physicians?
Yeah, I mean, they just kind of say, it'll go away, and we didn't really tell anybody. I had an EKG done when I had the racing heartbeat, and, my mom was like, I think it's from the booster, it'll get better. And it did get better. But I mean, we didn't talk to my doctors about it because there's nothing that they can do. They gave me, what are they called? An anti-anxiety medication where it lowers your blood pressure. They gave me that, which helped with the racing heartbeat, but I just had to wait, and eventually it did go away. So, I didn't talk to really anybody about it except for my mom, but
yeah, because there was no other reasons that they could find as to why you would have the racing heartbeat.
Yeah, there wasn't any other reasons. And my mom had a friend who her son got a booster and then had the racing heartbeat. And so she talked to them and said, they said, we think it's from the booster, but it went away eventually. And my mom told me that. She was, it's going to go away. You just have to wait, which, like a lot of medical things, some things do go away on their own.
They work out.
They work out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Emma, with all of this, what would you say the silver lining is for your journey so far, if any?
Oh, yeah. No, it hasn't all been negative. The thing that got me out of the increasingly fragile and dark headspace I was in was writing. It brought me back to journalism, which is my passion. And for that, I'm really thankful. That's what I want to do. I want to be a journalist. I want to write about science. I couldn't figure out my beat for a long time, like where it is that I'm good at, what I'm good at writing. I am very good at covering health and science. I find it really interesting, and I think it's always going to be current, and it's important. Science is critical right now, and that's what I want to cover. So it brought me back to journalism. And then I think the other thing, my parents have gone through a lot in their life, losing a kid, and, they've dealt, just so many things have happened to them. And this whole experience when I was doing really, really poorly, they were like, you can't just give up. Like, that's not an option. You have to keep fighting even if you're really sick. And I thought, okay. And I think it helped me understand a little bit just how hard life can get, but how it's never an option to just not try and not live. Cause like I'm here for a reason still, I do believe everything happens for a reason, and um just put everything into perspective. And I started writing because my parents were like, you're a writer. Like, if you are laying in bed all the time, write, like read, do something. Don't just sit there with your thoughts. That's not healthy. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And, they know me. I mean, I'm their daughter, so I hope they know me. And it just pushed me back into, what I meant to do. And it also it just helped me connect with them on a deeper level that I don't think I would have ever connected with them if I hadn't gone through this. So,
and
yeah.
you had said too, that you kept telling yourself you had to focus on, I'm going to recover. I wrote that down.
Yes.
In our pre-chat, you were determined, I am going to recover.
Yes.
And you are a very positive young lady, and you exude just this vibrancy regardless of how you feel or how you're feeling right now. If you're feeling like garbage right now, I would never even know it, but I hope that that's not the case. So how would you suggest to people your age who might be more inclined to be like, poor me and all kind of mopey and just having an attitude of I'll never get better and whatnot, because like we talked, you are this resilient old soul. I can tell, and nothing is going to hold you back. But sad to say, there is some commentary about your generation, Gen Z, being a little wimpy, not very resilient. Everything's kind of handed to them, etc. But how would you suggest to somebody who has a chronic condition, how would you explain or suggest to them that they stay upbeat? Because it's not always easy to do, no matter what age you are. But, you potentially have an entire life ahead of you. Hopefully that's the case. Long way to go. What would you suggest? How would you support them?
Yes. So, I can't control other people, but what I would say is, no matter what you're going through, having a positive, optimistic mindset will make things a little bit easier. And I mean, I've been bedbound. I've been so sick. I've lost loved ones. I've seen death up close. I've dealt with things that no one my age should have to go through. And it is significantly better when you just have an optimistic mindset. And that's obviously really hard. Of course, you're allowed to be sad. Of course, you're allowed to, be angry and in grief and depressed. But if you have a mindset of life is crap, it's never going to get easier. Yeah, then life is never going to get easier. It's going to suck. Of course, it's going to be bad. You're thinking it's bad. But if you look at it from a lens of, okay, this happened to me. I've been handed these cards. Now it's my job to, move forward, grow, and be positive about it. And some people might call that toxic positivity, but I mean, I had something bad happen to me. And I mean, I wrote an article about it that went viral. That's awesome, And I just think it's important to be optimistic. And when you're in a good headspace, good things come to you. When you exude good energy comes to you. But then again, you can't force it on people. And I've just found that looking at life through a positive lens, no matter how dark the exterior is, it makes things a little bit better, So,
and last we talked, you're in the midst of, using your words, birthing a support group for people your age and who have chronic illnesses or long COVID. How's that going?
Yes, my buddies and I were trying to start this nonprofit, and it's definitely the child is here, but we need to kind of nurture it still. It's not ready to be shown to the world. But we've named the nonprofit called 3RE for these 3 R's, which I don't remember off the top of my head. They're written down somewhere.
How do you spell? How do you spell that?
It's just like the numbers 3 and then R and E. 3RE. It's a very, I don't know. It felt good to us, and we're gonna put it out there. But yeah, we're gonna try and start a support group for young people with long COVID, just because I think having long COVID in your 20s or your 30s is a little bit different than having it when you're older, just because, right now, like, society is telling me, why aren't you dating someone? Why aren't you working? Why aren't you saving? Why aren't you living on your own? And I'm thinking, because I'm a little preoccupied with this other stuff, and it can be really isolating. And it's important that, the 3 of us who are trying to start this nonprofit, we've all been in that headspace where it's like, okay, I am so lonely. My friends are not speaking to me. They don't understand what I'm going through. And just having another person your age who's also experiencing this, it's like the most validating feeling. It just helps you. So.
Yeah. And the other friends that are working with you, are these the friends who've had journeys with chronic illness that you had mentioned?
Both of them have long COVID.
Well, they have okay.
They both do. And all 3 of us are like, okay, we're going to recover. But, we can't forget about what we went through, because it's changed us.
So your support group or your non-for-profit that you're looking at is specific to young people with long COVID. Is that right? Is that
long COVID or ME/CFS, which is, chronic fatigue syndrome, which symptoms can be similar to long COVID, but they're also different in a lot of ways.
Got it. Okay. All right. Very good. Emma, anything else that we should know about you and your journey, or recommendations for the health system or other young people with chronic disease, chronic illnesses?
Yeah. So we talked about kind of what got me through last year. And I do just want to shout out 2 of the bands that kind of helped me survive. So one of them is an artist, Maggie Rogers. She's phenomenal. Check her out if you have not. Her album Surrender, totally honestly, like, saved my life. There's a song Want, which isn't about, for me, it was about wanting to get my life back. It's about, it's not about that. You can listen to the song and you can probably figure out what it's about. But I would listen to that. And then the other album that really got me just through the darkness of what I was feeling was Lullabies to Paralyzed by Queens of the Stone Age. And that is just a phenomenal rock band. But there's so much more than that. And I think during my crashes, just listening to that album, like, distracted me from my symptoms. And then also, I was in such a fragile headspace that I thought, I have to focus on something that is going to make me want to stay alive to the next day or to next year. I thought, okay, I want to be alive when Queens of the Stone Age and Maggie Rogers drop new albums. And both of them have dropped new albums. So I'm so happy to be here so I can listen to them. But yeah, I just have to shout out those because I'm obsessed with music. And it's really helped me.
Yeah. Well, you are unbelievably inspiring, and
thank you. That's so sweet.
Cyril, you exude this passion for everything that you're doing, and I know that you'll be putting 110+% into getting a nonprofit together, your new work, your new job, getting back to climbing. Which are you close to being able to getting back to that, or starting a little bit?
It's a goal of mine. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to be able to pursue it the same way I used to for a long time. But my buddy who has long COVID, Mia, kind of told me, like, just go to the gym and just do like one boulder route and then relax. Like, you don't have to be over the top about it and push yourself, which is what I'm used to, but I mean, yeah, I'd like to get movement back in there because I'm an athlete, and it's part of the reason why I think this was so hard. This transition to being sick is because I can't move my body. Movement's really important for your brain and for your health. So one day I hope to climb the way that I used to, but for right now, eventually it'll be on the docket.
Well, I have a feeling that you will be getting there way sooner than later. Again,
yes,
using your determination and resilience, which again is so inspiring and should be for anyone, but definitely young people in your age range. You are an inspiration and should be a role model for all those things. So Emma, I want to thank you for joining me today, and I am looking forward to hearing more about your progress as time goes on. But I would encourage everyone to check out the show notes, where you can find a link to Emma's article on Medium, 10 Doctors, 2 States, 1 Invisible Illness. If you'd like to get in touch with Emma, we will have her contact information and all of her handles available. And if you are interested in supporting her future, hopefully near-term support group, please feel free to contact her as well as they work through that. And so happy to have you, Emma. And maybe we will have you join the podcast again at another point in time, and would love to have you back.
I would love that. Thank you so much for having me today. I've loved being here and chatting with you about my journey.
Well, it's been a pleasure. And thank you, everyone, for listening. I am your host, Laura Nozicka. I wish all of you well, and keep pushing for answers. Oh my goodness, that's a wrap on another compelling story. Thanks for listening to the Desperate for a Diagnosis podcast. If you would like more information about today's guests, or to find out more about Laura, me, go to desperateforadiagnosis.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow show updates and healthcare news on the podcast's Facebook page. If you would like to be a guest on the show, or if you have any questions, advice, or suggestions for our guests, please email me at lauramarie@desperateforadiagnosis.com.